Tèja VanWicklen, welcome to the podcast. I asked Randy King, like, okay, could you tell me some people that I should invite? And your name is the first that came up. So, and you were very kind in accepting my invitation. So thank you for that. Um,
Thank you.
I'm you're welcome. And I'm going to tell people just go to the website, go to Tèja's website. I put all the links in the show notes. That's going to be easy to find because there's so much that we can talk about because you've led, as they say, an interesting life so far. Lots of different things, lots of, good and bad and everything. Um, if you look at your bio, it looks like you just did a lot of, you start one thing and that leads to the next and the next and the next, and it keeps going. Is that accurate, or was there more like a plan to it?
Um, wow. I was a young kid in a void. I had zero guidance. I say I was raised by wolves. Um, so my life was a series of errors that brought me to a place now where only in my 50s I know what I want to be when I grow up. And it's clear to me who I'm supposed to be and what I'm supposed to be doing. But no, it was a series of, okay, I'm going to try this for a while. And ooh, somebody gave me this to do. And I happened to do this. It was always kind of writing, filmmaking, and martial arts, some version of that. But I've worked in the movies. I've, with martial arts, I've done stunt work. I've choreographed. I've managed a stunt team. I've taught martial arts. I've written about martial arts. I've worked on films. I've made short films. I mean, so it's always been some version of those things, but it's really been a series. It's been a series of errors.
With everything that you've done so far, what does your training now look like?
Like a lot of martial artists, it looks like there's a lot more stuff now that I've finally taken this long journey. I know exactly what I'd love to train in and learn, but my body's too broken to be doing judo and BJJ. You know, it's not the case for me to roll around on the ground with 220-pound guys. I did that in California, and I tore my calf muscle because a 220-pound uh, newbie was like, "Let me show you this cool, let me show you this cool leg bar that I learned," and took my foot and flipped my whole body over by pressing my leg this way, and there goes my calf muscle. Went and yeah, it was a year of rehab and stuff. Um, so yeah, I can't afford to be doing that anymore. I have wonky shoulders, and so now what my training looks like is uh, bagua, which actually is something that I absolutely love, which is super cool because it's a more combative version, more direct route to martial arts and self-defense than Tai Chi, Tai Chi has become really about health. What?
Back a little bit.
Yeah?
So it's Tai Chi Chuan. So it's the fist of Tai Chi.
Yeah.
So the Chuan is how the Chinese explain martial arts styles. Pa Chi Chuan, the fist of eight, what is it, eight powers, if I'm not mistaken. So I agree with you that the vast majority of the Tai Chi out there is just mainly health oriented and so on. But I would then venture to say that what the people who do that kind of stuff do, and more power to them because it's great for health, for many other things, but they kind of watered it down to the point where it's not what it used to be.
It's
Um,
repetitive
I
motion, it's meditative, and it's
It's
health.
good. It's great. Health, stability, coordination, air stabilizers are working, all that kind of stuff. However, they've kind of lost the whole reason for doing it. There wasn't a Chinese guy who woke up a few centuries ago and says, I'm just going to start moving my hands like this and do that and then do this
No,
kind of
it's a
stuff.
long
That didn't happen.
evolution.
Yeah.
So
And I
Bagua
was
been my focus, and I love it, and it's more directly relatable to it's. There's spiraling. There's a lot of things that can turn into arm bars very easily, and things that can turn into sweeps and everything. And I love it. And there's also Jingyi, which is hard to pronounce, but and I haven't experienced it yet, but I'm pretty settled on Bagua, and I'm loving it. So that's my main focus right now. Although I still have a bob at home. I still do some knife work and some stick work. Um, and work on my strikes and stuff. So,
Yeah. And anything for strength and conditioning, or
oh
is it
yeah,
mostly rehab now? Yeah.
yeah, uh, I do some very specific, specialized joint mobility stuff with a guy I've known for Albus Suarez. People can look up because he has their classes twice a week online, and he's a genius. And what it looks like he's doing is very slow, simple stuff that doesn't look like much. And you'd think, oh, this is ridiculous. I'm not doing this. I've been working out for years. I don't need this crap. And then it builds slowly. And what he does is I call him the joint whisperer. He works from, um, actually, it's called, what he does is called, I always forget the name of it for some reason. Functional range conditioning is what it's called, FRC. So what you do is you get your joint. A lot of the time we work the external muscles, and the external muscles, we're lifting heavy stuff, heavy weights, bench pressing, squatting, and the internal muscles are still asleep. And the joint capsule is asleep. So it's like you're walking in, you're throwing cold water on everybody, and you're going, everybody out of bed, let's go. And they're not with you on the project. This is, you go in to the room, you bring up some soft light, some soft music, you wake everybody up, you get them awake, you get them moving, you bring them into the room for the party. Everybody's talking, even the ones who don't like each other. You're getting everyone together on the same page. And then you get them outside to build a building, and boom, they do it in 5 seconds, right? You get everybody in. So I call him the joint whisperer because the movements are built to start on the internal part of the joint. And as you go through the class, you work farther and farther out until the entire joint is working with the muscles. And when you're done doing this workout, you've worked strength, you feel like you've done yoga, meditated, and had a massage. It's the only workout I've ever done where when I'm done, I'm sweating and I could literally fall into a deep sleep afterwards. Like most workouts, when you're done working out, you're like, I used to work out and I'd be like, okay, now I need a massage. I need to take a hot bath, and it's gonna, right. And I have to have some time between the workout and sleep. You can't just get off the treadmill and go lie down. So that's functional range conditioning is what I do. I also do some dancing when I can get to a dance class, because that's just for joy and hard work. I scooter and rollerblade. I do lots of other stuff, but yeah.
That's great. Yeah. It's one of the things that they don't tell you when you start training when you're young and you go, hardcore and all that kind of stuff. And like well, it's not true. They say it, but you don't believe it, or you're like, I don't feel anything. I'm okay. Yeah, you just took, a couple of hundred falls, this week because you were training throws and this and that, and you just bounce right back up. But eventually all that stuff catches up to you, and
No,
the wear
most
and
of us
tear is
waged
just horrible.
war on our bodies when we were young. We literally waged wars. We'd like, we have a joke in Sayakali. We say, if brute force doesn't work, use more brute force.
Yeah, no, exactly how you feel. I was very fortunate in that I was, yeah, it was almost 30 years ago that I started with Tai Chi, and totally by accident, because I was training one of my clients in a gym, and we would end the workout with some kickboxing, and then the owner starts talking to me like, "Okay, you do martial arts? Yeah, I do this, that, do kung fu. Oh, we've got a guy doing Tai Chi here." I'm like, "No, that's for old people." And no, these guys fight. I'm like, "Really?" Yeah, 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 they fight. I'm like, okay, so I'll check it out. And I get there, being young and strong, and knew how to fight, I thought, and then we do push hands. And this guy, like half my size, just tosses me around like a child. I'm like, what the hell is this nonsense?
Yeah, but
And the harder I try it, the quicker I end up on the floor. I'm like, this is bullshit.
the angrier
And
you
he's not
get.
even the
Yeah.
teacher.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was lucky in that I got over myself relatively quickly and thought, like, if that guy can do this to a guy my size, what can I do if I get, just as good as him, not even as good as a teacher? I'll be throwing guys my size around. Like, I gotta learn this, and I never stopped. So
So you've been doing Tai
I've
Chi
been
for 30 years?
almost. I started in '97.
Oh
It's my
God, I'm
main
so
art.
jealous. I'm so jealous. I have ADHD. I say this to everybody, but it means it's very hard for me to slow down. It's been all my life. It's been slow down, slow down, slow down. You go so fast. When you go fast, you miss things. You miss things, and you're kind of disconnected, external from internal. There's like this offset gap between your external reality and your internal life, and it's like you're never in sync. right? And it's very uncomfortable. And only now that I'm older and I've been able to slow down and I'm doing bagua, do I realize how much I missed. But I wish I'd been able to do it, because now when you come into sync with yourself, it's just so different. And what's interesting is, as you slow down and you come in sync with yourself, you can move slowly or quickly and it feels the same. You stay in sync and you time slows down. I call it, it's like time traveling, right? Once you've done all these slow motion movements, you don't have to rush to move to catch up to someone, right? Who's because your fear when you're fighting is that someone's gonna make contact before you do. But if you can actually move slower, or you can feel like you're moving slower and still be there before him.
The things that I do when I have a new student in my class, I just start with some basics. Like, these are the fundamental biomechanical principles of what we do here, like spine straight, but not always vertical. Weight transfers, stepping is not the same as shifting weight, and that kind of stuff. And the last thing I show them is what we call coordinated movement. And we start with just front stand, back stance, transferring weight and all. Okay, when you go to the front stance, extend the arm. When you go to the back stance, bend the arm. So you've got two things to coordinate. And then I add on top of that, and after a while, we've got like 5, 6 things to coordinate. And I'm like, look, everything needs to begin and end at the same time. So there's no pauses, but there's nothing rushed either. So everything needs to be coordinated. And the best way to learn that is by going slow. You don't learn a difficult, complex movement fast. You have to be able to do it fast if that's what's required. You don't learn it at top speed.
It's interesting. I came to Taekwondo when I was 15 through ballet. And ballet is all long extensions, holding your leg up. So it was natural to me in Taekwondo. It made sense to me that if I could do it slowly, I would be able to do it faster, better, maintain more control, and um and and not get injured. And it became kind of my superpower. And I would get to class early, and one of the ways I would warm up is I would do my forms in slow motion, transferring from kick to kick, down and into, just like it was Tai Chi, right? Holding my leg up really high. And I did this for years, um, because it made me stronger and more in control. But somehow it, I did Tai Chi for about a year when I found a guy in Tompkins Square Park in Manhattan, Roberto Sharp. And then we disappeared, or he went somewhere. I don't remember what happened, or I did, and we lost contact for a while. But I did a year of it. But somehow early on, even though I did those movements when I was in Taekwondo, it didn't transfer into Tai Chi for some reason. Unfortunately, I wish it had. I think I was too in love with Taekwondo to see anything else, around me at the time. Unfortunately.
It is something that I've talked with many people about, and just recently I was on a podcast with somebody, and he asked me about it as well. Is Tai Chi is not just, you don't do Tai Chi just because you move slow. That's not the same thing. So just doing,
Intentional.
karate or taekwondo or anything else, or external kung fu style slowly, doesn't make it Tai Chi. So there are additional elements to it. And there's something that Chinese call Shen Fa, which is like body method, or body mechanics is probably the term that we would use for it. They tend to be different from one style to the next when you look at the Chinese martial arts. But my point of view is mostly that from different styles around the world, people always look at, you got 2 arms, 2 legs, a torso, so everybody, can only punch in so many ways. I'm like, actually, yes, you can. Because the differences are just as important as the similarities. And my audience is tired of me saying that as Randy's law. And it makes a huge difference. You can, and I'll make an analogy for the audience, so don't get angry at me. Go to, I don't know, with a couple of firearms instructors in a group. They will go into intricate detail how you actually put your trigger finger on the trigger, how you're actually going to have to squeeze that, not like this, not like that, and put your thumbs like this and not like that, and so on and so on and so on, in minute detail, while, just between you and me, while complaining that, fine motor skill goes out the window on the renal test, but still, let's ignore that for a second, and then say, well, when it comes to hand-to-hand combat, and just brute stuff because all the other stuff doesn't work. What you know, I kind of disagree with that. What I will agree with is yes, if you want to get to a point where you can add more nuanced and complex details to it, you're going to have to do a tremendous amount of heavy lifting first. And the vast majority of people, A, don't do that. They don't want to, and B, don't need to. That's not the skill level that they need. The time invested with the result that you get. I mean, the bang for your buck it's not in balance. You have to spend so much more time, and then you get to the martial art part, which is radically moving away from the self-defense part. Like I said, I've been doing that stuff for 30 years. Obviously, that's not what I would teach for self-defense because you don't have 30 years. And just, 1 second. This is one of the things that was going on in the internal Chinese martial arts world when I started. It's like, you have to train for 10 years before you can do a self-defense application or you'll do it wrong. I'm like, I don't believe that. I don't believe that. A couple of 100 years ago in China, they would say like, it's okay if you die in the first 10 years of this training. You'll be fine afterwards. It doesn't make any sense. Okay.
No, yeah, no, you said something also about striking. I mean, all of it. Like, it's also just as a side thing, it's not going to be effective for self-defense if you could only strike in one direction. So you need things that are going to be, you can do things behind you and around in every direction, right? And move and flow in every direction, right? So it's also, I mean, it's not just Tai Chi and Bagua. When it comes to self-defense, you need a number of different things. That's why self-defense and martial arts are not the same.
And I mean, I was just before we started talking, editing for my online Tèja membership site, some sword stuff, and we have in our forms, and in whether it's the hand form and the weapon forms, we have what I call oh shit moments. And the one I was just showing is like, look, I've just handled this guy in front of me. There's a guy behind me. And I don't feel a disturbance in the force or anything. It's just that I hear something or I, by procedure, turn around and check my six, or somebody else, something, whatever. I don't have time to turn around and put my sword, in play. I don't have time because he's got my back. So what do we do? But you don't give up and die. And then we do these Hail Mary techniques, which is like, okay, everything's screwed up. There's no good solution anymore. It's gonna suck. And if we're lucky, we can get out of this alive. And that kind of mindset is something that I found is not everywhere. Whereas when you look at, for instance, look at military training, combat training, what you'll see is that they spend a lot of time on that kind of stuff. Like, yes, we work as a team. Yes, we do this and that. However, this can go wrong, that can go wrong, and so on. Just your weapon is malfunctioning for whatever reason. You have to be able to clear it and get it back in action and so on. And then when you look at martial arts, very often that aspect is lacking. It's like, well, what if something goes wrong? What do you mean something goes wrong? Like, yeah, you miss your
The only
punch.
constant is something going wrong. If you train and you don't train for something going wrong, then you're not training.
Yeah. And it's that
It's
kind of
almost the only
mindset.
thing you should be training for is for something going wrong.
Who was that said it? Was it some general, I think? I'm blanking, I'm getting older, I forget stuff. That, no, I know. Um, no plan survives the first contact with the enemy or something on this line.
Probably
So
Sun
whatever you
Tzu.
think you're gonna do,
Sounds like Sun
it's
Tzu.
not gonna, yeah. Um, that kind of brings us to your book. So, reimagining women's self-defense. Because I haven't been able to read it because it hasn't been out that long, if I'm not mistaken, only a few months. And I have a tremendous backlog of reading material. And but what I got from it when I read about it, it seems to me that what you try to do with the book is in large part try to fill in some gaps. We're just talking about gaps that might exist in martial arts, specifically when it comes to women's self-defense. Could you just give a little bit, maybe, obviously everybody get the book. I will put the link in the show notes, but give a little bit of an overview what people might expect when we talk about that, just what's missing in martial arts for women.
Actually, the book is primarily, and I'm closing it, I'm making it it's very niche market. Doesn't mean everybody can't get something from it. They can. It's a great as a reference book, but it's really for instructors because as a woman, after taking many martial arts over many years, I found that a lot of the stuff that was that uh what Randy calls time capsule arts, especially the ones that have been around for a long time and have evolved over thousands of years, were mostly created by men, or for even for military stuff, for group movement or for horseback or whatever, right? So, um, over the years, I've been told to do techniques, and I know as a woman, I mean, I could give you a list a mile, I could give you a list of probably 12 or 14 times when I've been in some sort of danger or situation that could have gone bad if I hadn't talked myself out of it, moved quickly or whatever, right? Or where things did go bad and luckily I'm still here. But the the techniques that I'm given for these circumstances often fail me. And they fail me because I'm shorter, I don't have the leverage, and I'm told, just do it. And if you practice it, it'll work for you. And it never did. And I figure if it doesn't work for me after 20 years, 25 years, 30 years, it's never going to. So that was the first, this is then. So I'm 20 years into martial arts and I'm pregnant. I have a terrible pregnancy. The whole thing is a nightmare. Um, my son is born and I'm still sick for a period of time. He is very ADHD. He cannot be left alone for a second. He needs tremendous help, food allergies, problems in school. It's a very complex situation. And from infancy, he usurped my brain for his own personal use. Um, and I was weak and sick and carrying this infant and responsible for this baby. And all I could think about was, how could I study martial arts for 25 years and have no answers for this? This is insane, right? I'm teaching military. I'm working with Navy SEALs, right? We're doing high level stuff. And here I am with an infant, ill, in my most vulnerable place of my life, except when I was younger myself. And if a guy came to me right now, I just wouldn't, I don't have an answer. And that really pissed me off. Um, so that series of things, from being healthy and having issues to being unhealthy and having a child and having issues, it suddenly dawned on me that everybody I knew wanted to train military and law enforcement, and that's where I was headed. But nobody was actually covering the people who were most at risk for, right? If I learned in psychology to think like a predator. And I had been doing psychology then for about 10 years, right? And I thought, well, if I was a predator, I'd find someone sick or injured or with a baby, and I'd go, um, if you do what I tell you to do, I won't hurt your baby. Believe me or don't, I don't really care because there's not a damn thing you can do about it, right? I mean, that's a predatory mindset, right? I mean, you find someone who has no recourse and you get everything you want out of them. You wring them dry for whatever it is whatever your purpose is. The fourth thing was the fact that as an instructor, women were coming to me and saying, so I need self-defense training, or something happened to me, or I was traumatized, you know, and I've always felt vulnerable, or I'm hypervigilant, or I have children and I want to teach them, on and on and on. Or I got a lot, from fathers. My 18-year-old girl is going to school, going to college now. I want her to know something. And I had no answer for them. Well, take a little judo, take a little this, right? Judo's really good because when people get close to you, blah, 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 right? Do a little bit of this, a little bit of that. But I had no real answer. And it dawned on me, martial arts and self-defense are completely different things. Martial arts is an ingredients list for a very, for a a series of dishes or something. I mean, it's, you can pick and choose from the martial arts world and pull them into self-defense, but they're not the same thing. Martial arts has a different goal set and they're individual languages. It's like ballet and tap. They're both dance, but they have similarities, but they're not alike. Right? So what Taekwondo has in common with Krav Maga or Bagua is maybe grounding and center of gravity and balance and some things, right? But they're not the same thing And so they're not this, and none of them are the same as self-defense. So how on earth, so when someone says, I need self-defense training, they go to the local Taekwondo school or they go to the local Jiu-Jitsu school. But they're not getting a full self-defense picture. They're getting a small piece of the puzzle, and some of it will actually get them hurt. Some of what they're learning will cause them, right? And I went through this when I was younger. I was a disenfranchised, lonely kid who was bullied through school. And when I learned Taekwondo, I can kick your ass. I'm I now no one can mess with me. I've so it causes people then to come out of the gym feeling really macho. I'm parking it. This is one of the things that I heard a lot. I'm going for a parking place in New York City. Some guy swerves into my parking place and there's nothing you right. I get out of the car because damn it, I do MMA now. I'm kickboxing, right? And he takes a baseball bat out of the car, right? I mean, all sorts of crazy stuff. He's screaming at you, it freaks you out. He comes at you, right? He's pounding on your car. And you're like, you're not ready for that at all because you're like, hey, man, like this is my parking spot, right? He's like, yeah, and so it, it's false empowerment and it's dangerous. So self-defense itself it's a big picture, and it's interesting because Randy's book came out right after mine, and we didn't know each other, and they are very similar. His from the point of view, although his is a great book for everybody. I recommend reading both of them. Randy is whatever is 6 feet 6'1", 220, and I am 5'3.5", 125 pounds. So there's a different viewpoint, right? Mine has some stuff about parenting and being female, but we both use a timeline. Mine is called the self-defense continuum. But it's the most important part of the picture of self-defense is the before, the during, and the after, right? Before is when you gather knowledge, when you fortify yourself and your world and your life, when you learn situational awareness and how to look at your surroundings and spot camouflaged people, spot behaviors, understand what the guy that you're with who's exhibiting behavior that makes you feel uncomfortable, but you can't put your finger on it. Now you can put your finger on it and go, oh, I'm out of here. Like I know where this is going, right? And not wait 3 years to do that. All of those things occur along a timeline. And the timeline is what allows you to see stuff coming. Otherwise, you just get blindsided. And we go, how do I keep this from happening? And then I go to a Taekwondo class, and the way I keep it from happening is to kick the guy's ass. No. Would you rather see the build up of cars on the highway in front of you and the guy who's kind of swerving and acting a little strangely and stay away from it? Or would you rather be really good at driving out of an accident once you're tumbling down the road head over heels in the car, but I've got a good car, my car's in good shape, and I've got a seatbelt on, so I'm probably going to be okay because I'm a good driver, but I'm in an accident? Or do you want to stay out of the accident? So I always say, it's better to stay out of trouble than to get out of trouble. And that is a big picture thing. That is not a martial art technique thing. It is technique. There's one small moment, and that's when all your other skills have failed you, that you're in a catastrophic situation against 3 guys with knives or a 220-pound guy against you and your baby. That's not a situation you want to have to fight your way out of. But if you do, it's not about martial arts and it's not about sparring. It's about doing catastrophic damage and disabling. It's not even about pain compliance. It's about disabling somebody so that you can get away without incurring the least amount of damage.
Yep, makes sense. Is it funny? When I talked to Randy a few weeks ago, and that episode's gonna come out soon. And it's funny. I said, look, I didn't know that what you were doing with your book, and then he contacted me for the podcast, and I saw what his book was about, and I've got this folder with dozens of unwritten or half-written books, and one of them is on a very similar topic, and that basically started when a friend of mine said, basically did an offhand comment about, you don't have to win just one fight in a self-defense situation. There's many fights before, during, and after. And I was like, somebody should write a book about that. And that was like 15 years ago. So eventually I'll get to it. And the thing I think I said told that to him as well. And I mentioned it because you mentioned, like, you both have similar books. For the audience, every author, every person talking about this brings their own set of experiences and insights. And violence is a gigantic topic. And I'm just sticking to violence as a word. You could call it self-defense, doesn't matter what you want to call it.
Mhm.
But conflict is a huge topic. Not everybody knows everything about it. That doesn't exist. I called my Facebook group, "You Are Not Aries Call of War," because he's the only one who knows everything. We don't. So it's the interesting thing about reading different books, or talking to different people, or watching
You
videos and
should be
so on.
talking about Thor. Why are you going to the Greeks?
I studied Latin in high school for 6 years, so that's kind of the mythology that stuck with me. I do like the Norse mythology as well. But the thing is that everybody brings their own perspective on it, and something that might not resonate with me might resonate with you. And the way that you write is not going to be the same way as a Randy writes or as I write. And he's got to put different accents in there, different nuances. You might include things like you said, what if you have a kid? Well, a lot of guys won't think about that. What if the guy outweighs you with, at least 100 pounds? Yep, that's a lot of guys don't think about that either, and so on. So I think it's a really big world out there. There's room for everybody. And the more knowledge that gets put out there, hopefully more people will be able to absorb that knowledge, put it into action, and then actually be safer than if they don't.
It's really a thought process, but the reason I wrote the book was because it seemed like um everyone's to me, you have to go back to the core issue. It's like scientifically, you don't start in the middle of the problem or at the end of the problem and work backwards. You got to start at the beginning of the problem, work forward, and then reverse engineer, right? But you can't go, okay, I'm going to start with these ingredients and try to solve a problem. No, you have to start with nothing and figure out how to solve the problem and reverse engineer or what, right? But you can't just start with specific ingredients and then try to solve a problem with these. You're handicapping yourself. So if you start with the ingredients from Taekwondo or the ingredients from Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or the ingredients from Krav Maga, and then you go, I'm going to create a system for women to protect themselves, you're already handicapping yourself.
Yeah,
So
but that, I mean, you know that those styles are the absolute best for everything. I mean,
that's what I
that if
thought because I loved it. Look, all martial arts, I say this, and I'll get kicked for this. All martial arts are cults in small ways. They all are. They're all religions. You get into a martial art and you drink. It's just like, it's so exciting, right? You get into it and you become a geek and you become a proselytizer. Um, However, when I was pregnant and I had a baby, my first thought was, what do I do? And I started working on techniques. And I very quickly realized there is no technique against three people or a guy with a knife when you have a baby that you're wearing attached to your body. There is no technique for that where you come out of it with a baby and you're both unscathed. So immediately that was like this. It shouldn't have been a revelation, but it was a gigantic revelation. At that point, it was like, isn't that what self-defense and martial arts is for? Also, it's why I came up with protective offense, because self-defense to me is right. Self is me. I need to protect other people besides me. Because if I survive and my kid doesn't, I don't care. That's no good for me. Um, and defense, we learned very quickly it's like if someone has a knife, defense sounds like this, right? You're not being defensive. You're not going to be able to defend against a knife for more than a second, right? The first move, maybe you defend against it, the next one kills you, or maybe the first one kills you. You're going to have to be offensive, um, and fast. So I coined the term about 20 years ago, protective offense, because self-defense also, at least in the US, is a legal term for what you say to the judge. It's the reason, okay, why did you kill this guy? Well, I killed him in self-defense because preclusion, because I couldn't leave, I couldn't stop him, I had somebody in the house to protect, he was blocking the exit, blah, 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 right? So yeah, so I thought, okay, martial arts and self-defense, not the same. What do I need? And I started backing up from the moment of attack. What can I do to keep an attack from happening ever? How can I see it way out? How can I do this, this, and this to make sure I never am in a position that I can't control, that or that I where I'm out of control and in a situation that is catastrophic. And we need that because now people ask me, what do I do for self-defense? And I don't know. What, you can read Randy's book, you can read my book. I have like 5 or 6 books that I highly recommend people read. Some of them are really advanced and difficult to read. Some of them are easier to read. You pick the ones um, you want to read. Donna Miles has a great book on situational awareness that I highly recommend. It's only 100 pages and anybody could read it, and you could read it in a day. And it's probably the first book people should read, even beyond my book, because it's something you can act on immediately, and it's very specific about how to keep yourself from seeing from stuff from happening to you. But my book is for instructors because there is no framework for self-defense. There's no overarching plan, right? We needed a framework. Here's what you need to know: A, B, C, D, E, all the way down the line, including, and Randy's the only other person, Randy and Rory Miller are the only other people I've seen really do this, is talk about the aftermath. Because if you're in a situation, even people I've seen, I can't tell you how many women I've spoken to who have gotten into situations where they were at a grocery store or in a Starbucks, and somebody turned on them, somebody having a bad day turned on them and freaked out and is screaming at them in their face. And it's amazingly terrifying and disempowering, especially when someone's bigger than you. But anybody who's really enraged, who's screaming at you angrily when you're just getting a cup of coffee, you suddenly feel incredibly vulnerable. And I've worked with women who, they're just this vulnerability that happens to them, like, oh my God, I'm in my home element and I suddenly feel really freaked out. And I can't not feel freaked out anymore. It's like you can't get unfreaked once you're freaked. They can't come down. Now they're hypervigilant, right? And when you're in this state of hypervigilance, you need a plan to get out of it, or you are now vulnerable in perpetuity. It's, you're on edge, and it's whenever you hear somebody, yells at you or says it, right, you become so, and if it's worse than that and you were actually attacked, it's even worse than that. So how do you come down after something has happened? Even after you weren't home and your house got robbed. You feel really naked, right? And what is it, like 20% of house robberies happen when people are in the house anyway? Happened to a couple of friends of mine. So what happens afterwards? How do you come down off of it? How do you learn from it? How do you debrief? And how do you strengthen yourself and make yourself more resilient afterwards so that you're stronger and not weaker? And that's all
Makes
the
perfect
arc of
sense.
self-defense,
And it reminds me, because what you said is that people then start with from their whatever system or art that they're doing, and then, okay, I'm going to use this stuff for women's self-defense. Buddy of mine, he used to be an air marshal, and we had this conversation one time, and he said, yeah, mission comes first, tools come second. What's the mission? And then you gather the tools. And he said, and he's obviously, firearms is a huge part of what he does. And he says the firearms community was filled with that. It's like, yeah, but you gotta get this caliber and that gun and this and that. And it's like, no, what do you need? Not what you want, what you like, what are you good at, but what do you actually need? And it, like you said, if you start from the lens of, it has to fit into this mold, this whatever system, you're going to run into trouble, because you might not get what you need from that system, or you just don't know. And you're going to have to discover it along the way, as opposed to starting from, what is my mission? What do I need to achieve? What do I need to get that? And then start gathering your tools.
You can't make lasagna with ham and beans.
It's going to be hard.
Yeah, and Toby Cowan really well. And his wilderness stuff is specifically in cold weather, right? So what happens if I send Toby naked into the woods with the only equipment he has is equipment for desert survival?
Be a bad day for Toby.
Knowing Toby, he'll do just fine, but he's got 40 years of wilderness experience, and he'd still say, yeah, I wouldn't like it. I wouldn't be happy with it, you know?
Yeah. Um, it's funny. In large part, what this reminds me of, something that's been on my mind for a long time is systems and principles, and for the past few years, cycles. There's a lot of cycles in society, in human life, in many aspects, uh, and so on. And many years ago, Bob Orlando, my late Kung Tao teacher, he wrote a book, Martial Arts America, and in it he talks about the cycle of evolution and devolution of martial arts. And he says, and it's just framework that you can use, and I think is relevant. And it's close to, it's similar to my story. It turns very similar to what you talked about. Is your experience is that you know depends on where you start in the cycle, but you're gonna go through it. And the cycle starts with a guy has to fight. He defend himself. He finds himself in a fight. He does something. It works. Great. It doesn't work. Then we don't do that again. He gets into another fight, and bit by bit, he accumulates some experience of a bunch of techniques and tricks, and that works. But if he wants to teach it to somebody else, like you said, it might be a woman, might be tall, small guy, doesn't matter. You're gonna have to
Doesn't
adapt.
translate.
And after yeah, and after a
You need
while, you get
principles.
to you get to like a small system, a combative system. And that's like, World War II combatives, Fairbairn and Sykes, all that kind of stuff, gutter fighting. And we get to that kind of stuff. And that then evolves as time goes by. For instance, we get to a peacetime period where you can't really practice with live swords on, prisoners anymore, but we have to use wooden swords. Are going to have to practice that way. And that then comes with a whole bunch of, as a friend of mine says, specialized mechanics that work well for wood, but don't work for an actual sword. And
It's like a
you
game
go
of
off into the
telephone. You know, when you
weeds.
start out with one sentence and you go along and it ends up being a completely different sentence.
So you lose stuff, you substitute it with something else because you don't have the real experience anymore. And that evolves more and more into what we get a martial art. A bunch of other stuff is put into it for a variety of reasons.
And even
And
worse,
then
then you have to sell it to people, you have to teach it to people, and to do that, you have to create drills. And to make money, you have to involve people in drills and repetitive drills that you do over and over and over again, which when you get your body, drills are good it's for short bursts for learning to put things together and embed them in your physical body. But if you keep doing them for too long, you lose you lose because the self-defense and the art of it happens in between the lines with your body and your mind and your lifestyle and the way that you work, right? It's not going from one thing to the other. It's everything that happens in between. And when you start to repeat and repeat and repeat, you lose the nuances and you lose the ability to break out of the drill.
that's what I learned. I mean, Bob did a lot of drills, and said the whole point of drill is developing skill, which means you have to break out of the drill. That's the whole freaking point. But we talk about his cycle. So you got martial arts, so fighting techniques, fighting system, martial arts, and then the devolution really starts to get to combat sports, martial sports, where you can't do this, can't do that, don't want to compete, and you have to water it down. And then you get to people who are really good at that, and then they get into a fight in the street, and the shit doesn't work. They get knocked the hell out. They get injured or worse, and they're like, "What the hell? Everything I learned, it's wrong." And they have to start from scratch again. What are the fighting techniques that work? And the cycle repeats and repeats. And I've seen this over and over. If you look at Fairbairn and Sykes, when he was in Shanghai, when Fairbairn was in Shanghai, I think he already did judo, if I'm not mistaken, and something else. And he's just like, okay, everything needs to be you just pared down to the essence, all the superfluous stuff out of there, and this works, that doesn't work, and so on. Same thing, World War II combatives. When you look at a lot of stuff, they would send people to work behind enemy lines with only minimal amount of training and an even smaller amount of hand-to-hand combat. And what they would say is like, okay, I'll show you, this is an elbow, this is a chop to the neck. What do you like best? I like the chop to the neck. Okay, I'm going to spend a few hours doing nothing but that. Every single time your life is in danger, this is what you do.
From different angles, from different places, from the lying on your back on the floor, it out of the car window, right? Yeah.
Yeah, just one technique.
Because what does Bruce
Go
Lee say?
go fight the enemy.
Bruce Lee says, I fear not the man who knows 100 kicks, who has done 100 kicks 10 times, but the one who's done one kick 1,000 times.
Yep.
You
And that's
probably
like,
only need 5 techniques, right? And the truth is, especially empty hand, for a small woman against a large person or multiple people, there are only a few targets on the human body that she's going to be able to do enough damage to protect herself with. You don't need 100 techniques. You need the techniques that can hit those targets from any direction.
And that's just like you said. If you want to make a living out of this, you have to create a curriculum. You have to have grades. You have to have belt tests and all that kind of stuff. And I'm going to piss off a lot of people, but I don't mean to. But many years ago, this is like several decades ago, I met this Israeli military guy, and showed me some Krav Maga stuff, and from Emil Lichtfield, so the founder. So really, that is like decades old back then as well, and it was very brutal stuff and so on. Fast forward to today, what I see now has nothing to do with that at all. Now, I'm not saying it's wrong per se, but I see a lot of craft people just putting on gloves and hitting the pads and turning it into kickboxing and MMA. I have
Yeah.
nothing against that. But what I am seeing is that, okay, look at the founder. Look at what he did. There's plenty of material left, and there's pictures, videos, conversations he had. There's books. There's a bunch of information about what did he actually teach, and he went out in the streets and actually used it, right? And it's been taught to the military and so on. And compare that to what you're doing now. So I'm not saying right or wrong. I am saying it's different now. Why is it different? Well, one of the reasons is that if you want to commercialize it, people don't stay.
Because it becomes what the goal is. Everything veers. Whatever the goal is, that's where it's going to go. So if it's in this direction, but now the goal is to make more money, we're not on the same trajectory anymore.
And I'm not singling out craft. I mean, I started with with Chinese martial arts. There's plenty of that in Chinese martial arts as well. Pick the art, it's going to be there. So it's just human nature taking over. When you look at self-defense, what we're talking about now in relation to your book, that's radically different. I would venture that the vast majority of, if we're talking really about self-defense or protective offense, what you like to use, it would be there's very little physical about it. The vast majority is information and skills that you need to acquire and put into practice, as opposed to fighting techniques or combative techniques.
Well, it's interesting. So as the chapters are all organized according to the self-defense continuum, which is broken up into 2 parts. I took it from Eric Kondo's 5 Ds of self-defense: decide, deter, disrupt, disengage, debrief, which is what I have to do to protect myself from the bad guy. And Mark McYoung, who's written a number of great books, both really terrific people. You can look them both up. Mark McYoung's website is encyclopedic. He's covered everything.
Yeah, I have Mark's a friend that I'll put it in the show notes.
No, not selfdefense.com or nnsd.com. And I think, and Eric's is not-me.org. And Eric is an amazing guy because he's a jujitsu expert, but he's paraplegic, which makes him really uniquely positioned to see the insides of stuff that other people don't see. Anyway, so Mark is intent, interview, positioning, attack, reaction, the steps that a predator has to take to get to you. So the timeline is stacked. Eric's decide over Mark's intent. So it's decide. So the first thing you do in the beginning stage is decide to recognize predatory intent. And then it's deter at the interview stage. And then it's right. And we go down the line in a self-defense continuum, and each stage is specific to that stage. What can I do as soon as I notice somebody is doing this, is in this stage of this situation, right? So it gives you a template for seeing a bigger picture so that you're right. So chapter 9 is the chapter on physicality. And that is disengage the attack. So it's disengage is the 5 Ds, is the D is disengage, and it's the attack stage of Mark's 5 stages, and 5 stages of violent crime. And so you're deciding to disengage, you're disengaging from the attack. And to do that, you have to get physical. Once you're in the attack stage, everything else before that is, you can do it without physicality. Once you get into the attack stage, it's that short time, but it's the single longest chapter. That chapter is probably 2 to 3 chapters long. I don't know, I think it's 70, 60 pages, 50 pages, something like that. And there are several tools in there, and there are principles about when you're thinking about techniques, so that it's not about what to do. It's about whatever martial art you're in. This is what you're looking for. These are the questions you want to be asking, and this is what you want to think about. So you want to make sure that every move that you're, every technique that you're working on, if you choose a few techniques to work on for your personal self-defense repertoire, you want to make sure that you're not using something that is more than one beat for his one beat. And there are many arts where they do it in Aikido, they do it in Taekwondo. You put a punch out there and someone does a spin and a kick and a thing and a right, and then well, I'm not going to stand here. In fact, as soon as I feel like I'm in danger, I'm moving too. So you only get to do one beat for a beat. And that's one of the principles you have to adhere to, because you're not going to get to do 3 things to his one thing. And if you assume that, it's already over before it starts, right? The other one is, if you're in protective offense, you've got to forget about defending. It's got to be an attack defense. So you're not blocking. There's no Taekwondo blocks. There's no just blocking, because if you just block and he attacks, you're always blocking and he's always attacking. You're always on the defense and he's always on the offense. And that's only a matter of time. So you have to be engaging in something that's a block and attack at the same time, so that you can change the rhythm of the fight.
This is one of those pet peeves that I have, and a friend of mine gave it to me. So that, that people always say the best defense is a good offense, and they bring it back to Jack Dempsey. Jack Dempsey didn't write that. What he did write is the best defense is an aggressive defense, and he specifically talks about strike back as you defend. It's not block, and then eventually get to fight, throw your own punch. No. As you defend, strike or do technique. It doesn't have to be strike,
right.
but
a lot of people said
aggressive.
The best offense the best defense is a good offense. It actually goes back, and they don't know who said it. A bunch of people said it. I think it even goes to, I can't remember who. I don't remember now. It's actually in my book, but there are a couple of different people said it. But yeah, I mean, you have to break into the reactionary gap, right? You know what the reactionary gap is, a crucial thing that a lot of martial arts don't discuss, right? And a really good way, actually, I think it's Randy in Randy's book. No, it's in Donna's book. And I wish it was in my book. She has a great drill for this. The drill is, keep your hands down at your side, have someone stand in front of you, and tell them to tap your shoulder with the same side hand, right? And try to stop it with your hands down at your sides. It's difficult. Now put your hands up like this. Now have them do it, right? You have a better chance. It's still difficult because the person who initiates the action has the upper hand. But that's the reactionary gap. And the only way to break into it and become the decider, the leader, what we call in Sayakali, the feeder of events, is to break into the reactionary gap and be on the offense and perform an attack defense.
It's funny, because I just had a new student in my Tai Chi class, and showing him everything, and then we get to the pushing hands part. Why do we do pushing hands? For a variety of reasons, and one of them is the reactionary gap. So I say, okay, throw a punch at me from a distance. He has to step in, and I can swat it out of the way. I say, okay, come a little bit closer, try it again, same punch, swat it out of the way. And then it gets close enough in striking range, and throw your punch, and I barely get out of the way and parry it. So look, here it gets really dicey, because I know the punch is coming, and you almost got me with it. So there's in reality, if you're going to surprise me with that, going to sucker punch me, I get knocked out. Now come even closer still, and I make light contact with his punching arm. I'm like, punch again. And I deflect it. I close my eyes, punch again. So I said, tactile feedback is quicker than visual feedback. So we have a choice. Well, no, we have a principle. Either we are all the way in or all the way out.
Right.
If we can stay far away, that's great. If we can't, you gotta get close enough to get contact. And contact is very quickly established when there's fighting going on. It doesn't have to be grappling, but there will be bodies touching each other. the main thing is that you don't want to disengage from there and just stand there like, I'll block everything.
Well, so
It's not
here's the
gonna happen.
problem. That's 100% right. The problem is, if you're a small woman, I don't want to get that close to you. Only if I absolutely have to, right? Then once I'm in, I'm all the way in and I have to do something really terrible, right? There's no sparring. I can't
Oh, no,
hurt
no,
you, right?
no, no,
It has to be
no.
catastrophic damage. But once I'm in there, I'm in a really bad position because especially if you know I'm a fighter, you're going to disable me pretty quickly and pretty easily and then it's over. There is a hundredth of a second that I have to respond if you grab me, pull me in close and are trying to knock me out or something. I mean, it's very fast. You don't even have to, all you have to do is punch me, right? You're probably going to knock me out. Um, so it's really crucial for women to see it coming ahead of time
Well, yeah,
and to be
and
ready from being on the outside to being shooting in really close and ready to do catastrophic damage. And it's really because you're talking about minute points of survival. I mean, it's really and the way that I describe it is, um, so the best way to describe it is I have a I'm me, I'm 5'4", 5'3.5", 5'4", right? I have a child who's 6 years old and the kid is sick. And I've said this before, I use this analogy a lot, okay? He's really sick. He doesn't want to go to the doctor. He's screaming, I don't want to go to the doctor. He's not going, right? I know he's in danger and I have to get him to the doctor. And I'm going, please, sweetie, listen to me. And he's not listening. Now, at a certain point, I'm going to pick him up, put him I'm going to walk out the door with him. Grab both his hands. He's screaming. He's biting. I don't care. I'll clean and fix the bite later. And the bite is not going to stop me from getting him in the car. Okay. So what if that's the differential you're talking about, right? And the fact is, most men never have to deal with that level of size differential. It'd be hard. You'd be hard put. How tall are you? Meters. What are you?
6 feet, I think.
Yeah. It would be hard pressed for you to be regularly in class, not once, but regularly in class, be dealing with somebody who's okay. So one of my masters, one of my Tuhan master trainers who I trained with a lot was 6'1", 360. You would have to train with him every day and three other guys like him to understand that nothing you do is enough, right?
I'm fortunate in that I had experienced that very early on when I competed, and I was warming up in the European Championships with a guy from the Dutch team. I was about 80 kilos, and he was like an extra large heavyweight. And he was fast, he was good, and we did a lot
And
of
guys are
throwing
not
inside the show.
necessarily slow. That's another
Yeah,
misconception.
and he would just pick me up. I was like, crap, this sucks.
Yeah.
Because I was used to be in my club, I was used to be, being the guy who was stronger and faster, and I couldn't do anything against that guy. I'm like, okay, gotta find a solution for this one.
Yeah, exactly. So the problem is the point of view is very different. And then you go to the fact that we're talking about self-defense for women who haven't even been martial artists. And by the way, most guys have not had that experience, the experience that you've had, because guys that big are relatively few and far between. So, so the problem is the point of view is really crucial, right? And if you're being taught by someone who's never been in that position, and not only or has, but only once, and like for a woman my size, your entire experience of martial arts is against people who are like 80% of the time it's against someone who's way bigger than you, right? So the math is just off. You're being told, do this, it's fine, it's fine by people who have never been in your situation. And I just found so much of the stuff was really fun, but it was not working for me. And the
Yeah,
only way to deal with it was to go back to the drawing board, to dump all the martial arts out, throw them all out, and start with what would I have to do? Where would I have to hit this guy? What kind of tool, weapon would I have to use if I had to do this? And now back out of that, what could I do to see this coming beforehand? Because this is it's not a good situation.
I'm taking the time. We gotta get to the second part, but I want to ask you
Yeah.
something else first. Um, so we've had, the last 10, 15 years have been, a little bit special in the way that society went and so on. And one of the things that I didn't used to get way back, 30 years ago, but I did get the last 10, 15 years was when I would say that, something about women's self-defense, I got the answer, well, teach men not to attack women, don't teach women to defend themselves. So, and I vehemently disagree with that. I said, look, your position creates more victims, more women get victimized because of it, because you're saying like, here's something that you can learn that actually helps you not get traumatized. And you're like, no, don't do that. Run the risk, because we're going to fix society first. And I was like, okay, we penalize stealing. It's a crime. We convict people for that kind of stuff. We do the same thing for murder. It still happens. So do you teach people not to steal? Yes. Well, many societies, we kind of insist on that. Like, this is how you behave. Still happens. Why is women's self-defense different? Why do you not want women to want to defend themselves? So how would you counter that as a woman when somebody has that position?
First of all, I would say you only have control over your own world. You don't have control over other people's worlds. So to work on other people's worlds, I mean, you can do things to advocate for stuff, but you can't control other people. You can only control your world and the way that you function and the way that you live. That's what you have the most control over, right? And it's a famous philosopher, then usurped and used brilliantly by Stephen Covey, is the circle of concern versus a circle of influence, right? If you concern yourself with everything you're concerned with, you're wasting a lot of time. You concern yourself with the things you have control over, right? You can't, the weather sucks, and I'm going to be really angry about the weather because I'm having a wedding. Well, okay, you know, there's nothing you can do about it. Change the date, get an umbrella, whatever you're going to do. But bitching about the weather is not going to get you anywhere. It's just you're going to sit on your hands and not have a wedding. So it's kind of like saying more bosses should hire me. I shouldn't work on my resume.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. I like that. Yeah. Um, well, that's a good answer. It's better than mine because they get even more upset when I talk, and I have, as I get older, I have a lot less patience with that kind of stuff, because I've no I am getting older. We
Yeah,
all are. I can
we're all
say that.
getting older. We're getting older when we're 20.
Um, because I don't talk about it much, but I've had throughout for the past 35 years, numerous times taught women's self-defense, both in private and public classes and so on, and had the sad experience of having women completely traumatized come to me and ask for help because of the horrible things that were done to them by men, and they did not want to be victimized again, without a fault, every single time afterwards when we were done training and so on. And they said, I wish I knew that. I wish I knew that before it happened. And I'm like, look, we can't do anything about that, but hopefully now you'll be better prepared, or you have a better shot at avoiding these kind of things. And last time I had this discussion with a woman who launched, don't teach women self-defense stuff. I said, look, you are creating more victims, and then they're going to end up with people like me for help, and it's going to be your fault. And she got really upset about that. And I'm like, I don't care anymore, because you have a big voice in society right now. In your side of the argument is influencing legislature and culture, and it's horrible for women. She got really upset, and I'm like, so I like your answer better. Don't have to work on my resume. People just have to hire me. I think that's a better one.
Is that
Um, before we move on to the Patreon part, what's next for you? So you've got the book is coming out again. Link in the show notes.
so
What's
this
next?
so this book is like I said, anybody can use it as a reference, especially if there's a certain area that you're really interested in. And anybody can read the book. The book is specifically for martial arts aficionados, geeks, instructors, so that I figured there needed to be some place, I've never seen it, some place where the idea of women's self-defense, protective offense, was encapsulated as a system, right? With steps, as a full spectrum system. And there are also training tools. There are tools that instructors can print out and use at every stage for training purposes, right? And there is a template and there is a timeline, so that when people say, what is self-defense? You can say, this is self-defense, and these are the things we have to accomplish along this timeline. And this is a big picture of what it is and how we have to teach it, right? Because right now it's like, what is self-defense? It's Taekwondo. What is self-defense? It's Jiu-Jitsu. What is self-defense? It's Krav Maga. It's Sistema. It's Bagua. It's, right? It's Capoeira. Um, and it's not. Lasagna is not spaghetti and meatballs, even though they're similar. And it's certainly not a hoagie from Philadelphia, or a ham sandwich. So I don't know. It's just, we have no, it's crazy to me. It's just crazy to me. There is no system of self-defense. So that's what this book is. This book is from any martial art that you're in. Doesn't matter what the martial art is. You can take this book and put the timeline up and use the training principles to influence your system so that it works for women like me, who are my size, with children, so that they can understand, oh, there's a before, during, and after. There's a do this, not this. There's a, oh, it's not the technique, it's the timing, and it's the this, and it's the movement, and it's what works in my body in a certain situation. And, because you need a language, so that a woman who's pregnant is very different from a woman who's not pregnant. A woman who's 6 feet tall and super skinny is different from a woman who's short and large. I mean, it's really different. So you need a language, not a series of answers. You need a series of questions, actually, is what you need. That person answers individually for themselves. So this book is a template to try to bring instructors together, because we're, like you said, we're doing people a disservice. We're not helping people. And if everybody takes this book and then extrapolates for their system, we'll be a lot closer to helping women. Raised children also, who already know this stuff, rather than having to learn it as they're going to college and they're in a bad relationship already or something.
Great. Where can people reach you?
They can reach me on TèjaVanWicklen.com. Also, it's also the name of the book, so it's very easy to find, because it's also ReimaginingWomenSelfDefense.com and ProtectiveOffense.com. So any of those will work. And
Great.
all of
I'll
my
put a link.
all
I'll
of my
put a link in the show
Instagram,
notes.
YouTube, LinkedIn, everything is either under Tèja VanWicklen or Protective Offense.
Great. Well, folks, again, all the links that we mentioned will be in the show notes. So go to wimsblog.com/ and the number of this episode. That's going to be the short URL, and I'll put everything there. Tèja, thank you so much. This was awesome. We are going to hop on over to the second part of the conversation, where my patrons have awesome questions for you. Everybody, thanks for listening, and talk to you next time.